Long before pharmacies existed, people still got sick. They still got cuts, scratches, infections, life was harder, travel was slower, and help was often far away. Yet somehow, people survived. Generation after generation, century after century. And when you start looking through history, something strange begins to appear. Different cultures, different languages, different continents. People separated by oceans often kept returning to many of the same plants. Not once, not twice, but again and again and again. Why? What made these particular plants so important that they survived in human memory for thousands of years? And perhaps an even stranger question: why have so many of them been forgotten today? Most people grow up assuming healing has always belonged to modern medicine. But for most of human history, that wasn't an option. People worked with what they had, what grew nearby, what survived difficult seasons. And that's what makes these plants so fascinating. They weren't valued because they were fashionable. They weren't sold in bottles and were not promoted by advertisements. They simply earned a reputation over time. A reputation strong enough to survive wars, migrations, famines, and entire civilizations rising and falling. And when you trace those stories backward, certain plants keep appearing, almost like old companions that followed humanity through history. And here's the first big discovery. Some plants became important not because people told each other they were valuable, but because generation after generation kept rediscovering them. Then another culture, thousands of miles away, arrives at a similar conclusion, and over time, certain plants quietly became part of humanity's survival story. Nature never created these plants for humans. That's the interesting part. Plants evolved their own protective compounds long before people arrived. Aromatic oils, strong scents, defensive chemicals, nature's way of protecting the plant itself. Humans simply noticed when leaves released powerful aromas after being crushed, when certain plants stayed surprisingly resistant to insects, when particular herbs became valued enough to keep growing near homes generation after generation. The plants weren't trying to help people. They were helping themselves, and humans paid attention. Garlic, the plant found almost everywhere. If there were a world map of humanity's most trusted plants, garlic would probably sit at the center of it. Ancient Egypt, Rome, medieval Europe, Asia. Different people, different languages, the same plant. And perhaps that's what makes garlic so remarkable. Not that one civilization trusted it, but that so many did. Everyone knows the experience. You crush a fresh clove, and within seconds, the smell covers your hands. Strong, sharp, impossible to ignore. That powerful aroma became part of garlic's reputation. And long before modern kitchens embraced it, people were already keeping it close. Not because it was exotic, because it was dependable. Thyme, the herb that followed armies. Some plants built reputations so strong they traveled wherever people went. Thyme was one of them. At first glance, thyme doesn't seem impressive. Tiny leaves, small stems, easy to overlook. Yet throughout history, it appeared again and again, particularly among people constantly on the move. What makes thyme memorable is its scent. Walk past it on a warm afternoon. Brush the leaves with your hand. Suddenly the air changes. A rich herbal fragrance seems to appear out of nowhere. For such a small plant, its presence feels surprisingly large, and perhaps that's why generations refuse to forget it. Oregano, the wild Mediterranean defender. Today, most people associate oregano with food, pizza, pasta, Mediterranean cooking, but oregano's story began long before modern recipes. For centuries, it was valued throughout regions where harsh summers demanded resilient plants. And oregano certainly survives. Dry soil, strong sun, long periods without rain. It keeps growing. But what people often remember most is the smell. On a hot afternoon, brush against wild oregano. Instantly, a powerful aroma bursts into the air. The scent feels almost larger than the plant itself. And for generations, that unforgettable sensory experience helped keep oregano firmly rooted in human memory. And here's what becomes truly fascinating. Most plants people relied on throughout history eventually faded from memory, yet these plants kept returning, again and again, across different places and different centuries, almost as if people weren't simply passing down the knowledge, they were rediscovering it. That realization changes how you look at them, because maybe these plants survived history for a reason. Sage, the plant people refused to lose. Some plants earned such strong reputations that people deliberately kept them nearby. Sage was one of them. Even its name reflects the respect people gave it. Generation after generation planted sage close to home, not far away, not hidden in the wild, close enough to reach easily. There is something deeply human about drying sage. Bundles hanging indoors, slowly releasing their fragrance, filling a room with an aroma that feels connected to another time, another generation, another family, and perhaps that's exactly why sage survived. Not through books, but through daily life. Horseradish, the plant that fights back. Horseradish is impossible to ignore. Once established, it often refuses to leave. It spreads aggressively, returns repeatedly, and seems determined to survive. But the real surprise comes during harvest. Cut into fresh horseradish for the first time, and the reaction is immediate. Eyes water, sinuses wake up. The aroma arrives all at once. Powerful, sharp, almost shocking. Few plants create such an unforgettable first impression. And that may explain why horseradish repeatedly appears throughout traditional plant knowledge. People remembered it because forgetting it was difficult. Yarrow, the forgotten battlefield plant. Some plants carry an unusual amount of historical intrigue. Yarrow is one of them. It appears throughout military history, folk traditions, ancient stories. And yet today, many people walk past it without recognizing it, which is surprising. Because visually, yarrow seems gentle. Delicate clusters of flowers, soft-looking foliage. Nothing about it appears dramatic, until you learn how often it appears in old accounts. Again and again and again. A surprisingly tough reputation hiding inside a surprisingly delicate plant. And perhaps this is the strangest discovery of all. The plants people trusted most were often the plants hardest to get rid of. The ones that survived drought, neglect, harsh weather, and abandoned gardens. Almost as if nature had already selected them for survival long before humans did. Plantain, the weed people walk past. And perhaps no plant better represents forgotten knowledge than plantain. Not the banana-like fruit. The common weed, the one growing quietly between pathways, along sidewalks, beside roads, in neglected corners. You've probably stepped over plantain hundreds of times without realizing it, quietly growing where nobody is looking. Or if they do, they consider it a nuisance. Yet historically, many cultures valued plantain far more than modern people do. That's what makes it so fascinating. One of the most overlooked plants today was once one of the most recognized, growing quietly in plain sight. waiting for someone to notice. And here's the second discovery that makes all of this even stranger. Many of these plants share something unexpected. They're resilient, drought-tolerant, perennial, self-seeding, almost as if the plants humans valued most were also the plants nature designed to survive. Not fragile treasures, but stubborn companions. Plants that stayed. Never simply herbs. Never simply something growing in the garden. They became companions. Plants people learned to trust. Plants that quietly earned their place through generations of observation. And perhaps the most surprising thing of all, many of them are still here, still growing in gardens, still appearing along pathways, still releasing the same scents when their leaves are crushed. The knowledge faded long before the plants did. And sometimes, the most valuable knowledge isn't the knowledge that was carefully preserved. It's the knowledge that survived because people kept rediscovering it.